And under management, this is, or sorry, maintenance, this is a station setting. There's a new setting in your register settings. And you'll set it up for each printer, like invoices, alternate invoices, just like you would do normally. And so we go to invoices, and you see there's a new selection on the end here that says reporter. So that's the new built-in report writer or report engine. All right, so I've already selected that. And I've already selected the report that I want to use for this. So if I wanted to pick one, right now I've got this AR aging report is actually miscategorized. It probably wouldn't show up there. But if you had designed your own invoice there or modified our invoice here, that would show up in the list, and that's what you would select for here. Okay, so you can select a report for any of these things. And I can show you what that looks like. We'll go to transactions and invoice history. Got some mail I need to read. Let's pick, okay, this invoice has sections in it, and it's got a couple notes on it. Let's go ahead and look at what we've designed for this. So it's just normal printing like you're probably used to. It's a little bit, okay. I'm on a second monitor here, so my report is already showing up. It's just on my second monitor, so I need to bring it over so you guys can see it. So there you go. So this is a report that we've designed in the new report designer and report writer. I keep wanting to call it a designer because we're kind of used to that around here. But anyway, so this is the new report writer generated invoice, and looks pretty good. You'll be able to get in. I'll show you this invoice in a second and see how you can actually customize it to do things. One thing that we've got here is different ways to save this, and we're kind of go over this later because we're probably going to take some of these things out, but there are lots of ways you can export this out. You can export it to Excel and PDFs and all sorts of different things, JPEG images. It's a very flexible report. Close doesn't work. There we go. So let's close that down. So that's kind of how you set that up. I can show you how that looks. Let's go ahead and get in here. So let's go ahead and talk about how you actually manipulate reports and get into the actual report designer. You go to your report center as normal, and actually I'm going to back up. The very first thing you're going to want to do is give yourself rights to edit reports, because we have locked this down security-wise because you don't want your employees just jumping in and starting to churn out reports and getting into data you don't want them to get into. So you would want to go to management, you would want to go to employees, or go to your security groups if you're using the security groups. And there's a new setting in security. Let's find what it's got. It's not in the group. Here we are. I'm not in the group. And I think it's got to be under reports, right? Reports. Here we go. This is it here. Able to add custom reports. This gives you access to the actual report writer. And then this allows you to set report properties. And I'm going to show you what report properties are. That's another level of security that we've added to the report designer, or report writer. Let's close that off. So anyway, if you try to go to the report writer and you can't get into it, it's probably because you didn't give yourself access to it. And I'm not sure if it pops up a message that says, hey, you don't have rights. It should, but I'm not 100% sure on that. All right, so we're going to actually go into the report writer. So I'm going to click over here. All right, and you'll notice that this report options dialog pops up. When you're writing reports, there's usually input you need to give that report. You might want to set a date range. You might need to choose a customer. You might need to choose a vendor. You might need to choose an inventory item. And we're going to be expanding this in the next week or so to include the ability to select multiple vendors, multiple items, because we want to be able to use all the same reports that we already have built, but still use the same dialogues that we've already had in place. So we're working to enhance those, but right now we've got very simple selections you can make as far as what's going to go into the report designer. In this case, I'm just going to go in and actually load in the invoice transaction report, so I'm not going to set any of these. I'm just going to say OK. And that's going to launch the report writer. Again, this came up on my second monitor, so I'm just going to bring it over for you. Okay. So when you're first looking at this, it can be a little intimidating, I think. for those who haven't used the report writer yet, but it's actually laid out pretty logically, I think. And so once you get used to it, you can kind of move around it pretty well. What we've done is create a special type of report called default, so you can kind of get a jump start into creating a new report. And this default report that we're looking at here already has your company name in there and a start and end date in there. If I scroll down, it's got a page number at the bottom. So you can start with that, or you can start your whole new report. And I'm actually going to turn over to John Hamilton in a minute. He's going to show you how to start a brand new report. But I did want to show you the layout of the invoice. So I'm going to go up to the little round button up there, and I'm going to open a report. Right. Okay, so when I do that, it opens up this dialog. Okay, so we've got a couple different types of reports here when you open a report. One's a report center report, which is what we were just in, the report center. These reports are going to show up in the report center, and we've grouped them all the same way that you see in the report center. So you can add your reports in, and they'll show up in the report center where you might expect to find them. The others are internal reports, and these are reports that are not in the report center, but like the transaction report we just looked at, you want to place them in those areas because there are still special places in Positive that aren't report center reports. All right, so here's the invoice that we just looked at. Anyway, I'm going to open this just to give you an idea of what that invoice actually looked at, and to give you an idea that you can actually get in here and change things now. And it's easier than if you're used to trying to change the old report or the old invoice. This is a lot simpler. It's laid out a lot easier. Or at least we're trying to lay it out a lot easier for you. Basically what you've got here is, if you're used to the old invoice screen, it's pretty much the same thing. You've got headers, you've got detail bands, you've got footers. Okay? What we've done here is actually kind of break this up into separate kind of reports so that, for example, this part up here where it says company address sub-report, this is kind of a placeholder here for this tab up here where it says company address. Okay, so if I click on company address, then this is what's printing in that little box there. And we've actually broken it down into different parts. So you've got the payment part is another kind of a separate report, and the delivery address is another type of separate report, as is the invoice address. It's also got invoice notes that are a separate type of report. Okay, so that kind of breaks it up a little bit so you can go and actually customize what's going to go in each of these little parts here. Now, when we get down to this part, this is where we got the purchase order and the authorized buyer and all that sort of stuff is in the middle here. And then you start getting down into your group headers where it's grouping things. Here's the notes where he's got the notes printing here. This is one of our dealers actually designed a lot of this. So that when I say he, I'm referring to him because I didn't do any of this work really. Anyway, your details and stuff. And you can, if you look down here in the bottom right corner, this is your zoom bar. So I can zoom in a little closer so I can get a good look at what some of these fields are because it can look kind of small. There we go. So we can see on the data invoice, which is the invoice part of it, you've got the barcode here, he's got the quantity over here. And these are properties of each of these things over here. So you got to kind of get used to that. Every field is going to have a property listing where you can change a lot of things. You can change colors, you can change how that field acts depending on what the value is in that field. We can hide things, we can not hide things, do all sorts of things with that. So we don't want to spend a lot of time in there. But for example, though, say that this is the payment section here and you didn't like where that was, you can just move it. And so now the payments will be over on this side. So what we think is probably going to happen is that a lot of you are not going to get really deep into this invoice part here. You might want to change a few things, maybe make some of the fonts different, make them larger, but you're not going to be actually digging in too deeply, I wouldn't think, into this part. But we can help you if you need to get into there and change some things. We are going to be actually documenting a lot of this. One of the things that I think is going to be the hardest is documenting the data that you can get access to, because you can now access every bit of data that we store in the reports. As far as learning how to use the report designer, This is, we get this from Simulsoft. This is actually another company that writes this whole designer part here, and we've integrated it into our software. And the name of the company is Simulsoft. So go here. They've got good tutorials there as far as how to use, just the overall how to use the report designer itself. And we don't want to replicate all of that. What we're going to be documenting more, I think, is the data dictionary. You know, what the data is, how it links to different things. And when we do a sample report and we take you through it, you can kind of see how some things flow. Some reports are going to be very easy for you to do. Inventory reports and customer reports. A lot of you want to get that information out, who bought what, and you know, that sort of thing. And those are not going to be hard for you to do. Some reports are going to be very difficult to do, and you're going to want to have either us help you, or a lot of our dealers are getting very versed in how to do these reports too. And there's no way to bring in your existing customer reports to this report writer, so you would have to write them again.
Yeah, if you wanted to use this report writer.
Right. We're not going to get rid of anything we already have, though.
We may be getting rid of some of the internal report designers that we have, but those don't allow you to make custom reports anyway. So any custom reports you have right now are either using Clarion Report Writer,
or
List and Label, or Crystal Reports. And those three things we don't have any plans in the near future of getting rid of. So.
Yeah. So we're not going to replace anything as much as just give you a whole new way of doing all your reports. I want to go ahead, though, and exit out of here and show you one more thing before we jump back in and start a brand new report. So I'm going to close this. I'm not going to save changes. Okay, when you design a report, it'll end up, like I said earlier, on either it's an internal report that you don't see. They're going to end up here on this list. Okay, so wherever it says custom reports, these are reports that were built in the report designer. So I could run this report here. Here's my simple stock report. I just click on Run Report, preview it. Again, it's going to show up on the other monitor. So let's drag it over for you. There we go. Okay, there you go. So this just made a very simple stock list, grouped by department and category. These are apparently uncategorized items because this is all of my sample data, and I really mess this data up from time to time. But what was that, 77 pages, and you can see how fast it was, how quickly it generated it. And now I could take this report, if I wanted to, and save it out as HTML, Excel, PDF, any sort of thing. So a lot of flexibility here, even if you're just doing a very simple thing like a stock report. You know, what have I got in stock? Now, I also could have changed my filter so that I only showed things that were in stock, or I only showed things that were out of stock. So there's lots of things we could do to modify this report. So let's go ahead and close this. But what I wanted to cover here very quickly before we get started is our properties of this report. Okay, so if I click on properties, then you've got this screen that comes up here, and it's kind of like what we looked at when we started the earlier report, but it's got this whole new security settings on the side here. So I'm not prompting for a date. I'm not really prompting for anything because I'm just doing a list. But I might want to restrict my employees from printing this list. And so I would just turn off their checkbox as far as, you know, they can't print it, they can't edit it or delete it, and so that keeps them all away from doing things. So if you leave this blank, if you don't set this up at all, then everybody can print that report. But as soon as you start adding people on it, then it's going to follow whatever these rules are as far as who can print your report and who can't. So I just want you to be aware of this. You know, make sure that you do set security on your report once you've saved it. And at this point, you do have to go back and reset whatever you, like if you're choosing a customer, you have to make sure that's set up for your report as well. But we're working to make that a little bit easier. So it's set up actually in the report designer itself, I think. Okay, so I think that's kind of the way it goes. You would go to the report writer, design your new report, save it, set your properties, and then use it. All right.